The comments heard on The View from a Pew are those of Mac McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now, here is today's The View from a Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View from a Pew.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Mac McKoy, and welcome to this edition of The View from a Pew with my co-host Delmar Austin, Pastor Delmar. And the next couple of shows that we're going to record today, as well as these are being broadcast live on social media, we're going to talk about what the Bible says about the realm of the dead. And this is all biblically based. And for some of you, you may disagree with it, and that's okay. But I want you to at least take the time and listen. We'll have Bible verses and things like that throughout the program. And I think if you do your own studying, you don't have to take what we say for gospel. Well, you can if you want, because it is gospel. But take a look at what the Bible says about the realm of the dead. And this isn't a Halloween thing or, ooh, this isn't creepy. This is biblical. And I think it's important. And I've asked Pastor Delmar to do this program with me because he's very well versed on this. So good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you much.
And let's just go ahead and start out. We've done a couple of these before, and so this is further of this. And this is number 3, and then after we're done with 3, we'll take a little break and then do 4.
That's right. And I'd like to go back, Mac, just briefly to look at what we've talked about already in our first 2 presentations that we gave. At the time of the creation of the earth, God creates mankind, and he gives him a warning right away. It's right on the same day that he is created. God speaks to Adam and Eve, and he says to them, he says, if you eat of the tree, which is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you shall surely die. Okay? So God is giving him a warning and saying, avoid this. Now, mankind is tempted to believe what the serpent in the tree is saying, and so mankind eats. God comes down, speaks to Adam and Eve, and this is what he says. He says, you shall return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Now, he doesn't say in there that your spirit or your soul or whatever is going to go immediately to heaven, so don't worry about it. No, he says, you were taken from dust, creation, you're going to go back to dust again. That's what happens. God's trying to explain it clearly. Now, in the temptation itself, the serpent, which is Satan,
yeah.
The serpent is saying to Adam and Eve, what did God say to you? That you were going to die? Oh, no. You're not really going to die. That's what he says.
That was the first big lie.
That's the first big lie.
Yeah.
And mankind buys this idea that when we die, we don't really die. So it's okay. After you die, there's some kind of existence that goes on. And people have believed it, and all the way around the world. If you go back to the earliest times, you find out that people had this concept that when you died, you didn't really die because there was some kind of spirit that left the body and continued on. I was reading a book recently, listening to an audiobook called The Dawn of Everything. And it was interesting that when they were talking about death is a big thing for very early societies. These are hunter-gatherer type communities around the world. Couple things about death. People were always buried with a good number of things
Yeah.
with them. Even in very simple societies, maybe somebody would be buried with a necklace of shark teeth or something like that,
Yeah.
just because they had the concept that later on, after you die, you go into some different kind of existence and you're going to need these things. So we'll just bury these things with you so that you have them later.
Yeah, that's what created the pyramids.
Exactly. That's just with the pharaohs,
Yeah,
you know,
the
right?
kings and everything like that. Yeah.
You have all those treasures with you because you're going to need those in the afterlife.
Now, I want to just pause for a second and make sure that those people listening understand that we're still going to heaven. Your teaching today doesn't change that.
Yes.
We're not telling you that you're not going to go to heaven or that you're not going to go to hell. We're just kind of explaining the realm of the dead. So I just wanted to.
The question is when.
Yeah, when.
The question
That's
is
right.
when.
When.
So anyway, one thing is burial. The other part that was interesting about early societies were ritual executions that took place. Actually, people that were buried with other individuals when they died. And it's found in many different parts around the world. It had to do with enemies. The enemies
I've never heard this.
of this group of people. Well, it even happened in Egypt too.
Okay.
There were times, there's ritual executions that take place, and it is believed that part of it was connected with having control over the spirit of another person. Because not only are they an enemy in this life, but they could be an enemy in the next life. And so if I have their body and if I have their skull, many times skulls were buried.
I get it. Okay.
Then
Yeah.
I've got power. I've got control. And so it just shows that people have this idea, and they had it from very earliest times, that when you die, you don't really die, that that your spirit or soul or some kind of existence goes on.
Yeah.
After that time.
I've always said, I've never used the term pass on. I've always used the term pass through, because we really are going from this life to the next.
And the question is again, when?
Yeah.
When will that take place?
Right.
In the Old Testament, I believe that the concept that is taught is soul sleep.
Okay.
That when a person dies, that they rest in the grave.
Well, and Jesus many times, to Mary and Martha, your brother is not dead. He is just sleeping.
I'm going to go exactly there.
Okay.
John chapter 11. This is when Lazarus dies, right?
Yep.
So Jesus comes back to Bethany after Lazarus has been dead for a few days. And we pick up the story in verse 20 of John 11. Now Martha, as soon as she had heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again.
Yeah.
There will be a time you will see him again. He will rise again. Verse 24, Martha said to him, to Jesus, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. When? At the last day. That's when I will see him again.
Yeah.
I will see Lazarus again. Why did Martha have this idea that he wasn't an immortal soul, that he had already gone to heaven, or he had gone on to another state of existence? Martha had this idea. Why? Because it's scriptural.
Yeah,
It
this
was
was
biblical.
Old Testament.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what the Old Testament teaches, that there is soul sleep that goes on.
Well, and when I learned about this, I thought about the term rest in peace.
Yes.
RIP is one of the most common terms used when somebody dies. But it's not die in peace. It's rest.
Rest in peace.
Yes.
Exactly.
Not rest in death, rest in peace.
And that's the idea of soul sleep.
Yeah.
That there is a rest of death that takes place. Now, there's several different passages in the Old Testament that we can look at, but One of my favorite passages, Ecclesiastes chapter 9. And to me, this is what answers it as well as anything else. Are people going on to another life after death? When they die, the spirit or soul or some kind of ghost-like thing leaves? Listen to what it says in the Old Testament, Ecclesiastes 9, verses 5 and 6. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. Bible is unequivocal here. The dead know nothing, for they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten, and their love, their hatred, and their envy have now perished. Those things are gone. Even their love is gone. Never more will they have a share in anything done under the sun. In the Psalms, I've used Psalm 91 many times for funerals, talking about what happens. God says mankind has a basic kind of lifespan. 70 is what he said.
That equals 80.
Which is 70, sometimes 80.
Okay.
All right? But it says, teach us to number our days. Teach us to number our days are important. Because what? All of us go to the grave. All of us eventually die on this earth. So this is what happens. Therefore, while you have life, use that life. Make good choices. Make good decisions in this life before that time of death comes. Because when you are dead, you are resting in the grave. Your love, your hatred, your envy has all perished. And now you wait in the grave.
Country music just lost a great guy by the name of Toby Keith, and in his farewell song that he wrote and performed, he said, "What would your life be if you didn't know the day you were born? Not the day you died, but the day you were born." And if you think about that, that's pretty crazy. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. What happens after your body dies?
And to me, the Bible's pretty clear about it. The Bible explains it, I believe, in a very clear way. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, and we actually referred to this verse before, it says, it's talking about what's going to happen at the end of time. Daniel chapter 12 is the last chapter, and all these prophecies that have been given in Daniel are coming to a completion now. So what's going to happen when we get down to the end of time? Bible says, many that sleep in the dust of the earth. That's all those who have been waiting in the grave. They're going to come back to life again because it's the last day. This is when a great resurrection takes place. That's what Martha was talking about.
Yeah.
She knew it because the Old Testament taught it.
Yeah.
Now, why is that? That people in the Jewish, Judeo-Christian background had this understanding when they followed Scripture. Because everyone around them had this idea, when you die, you don't really die, you go on to some kind of existence. And here in the Judeo-Christian record of what people believed, what they actually understood, was that they rested in the grave till the time of resurrection.
Well, it even talks in Revelation about when Jesus returns, the saints will rise out of their graves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what do you do with Paul's line that says, to be absent from the body is to be with the Lord?
Well, Paul had to look at his life all the time because he was, there were people after him. They were persecuting him, were going to take his life. And he had to deal with that reality that was there. When Paul says that, he doesn't answer the question when, which is what we've just been talking about here.
Right, good point.
To be absent in the body means that how was it phrased again? Absent in the body and present in the Lord.
Absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
Right. but because when death occurs for Paul, Paul doesn't see himself because he has the same kind of biblical explanation. He doesn't see himself as just suddenly being gone and being in the presence of Jesus. He sees himself in terms of the resurrection. And Mac, that's what we're going to talk about in our next presentation. We're going to talk about the resurrection. Paul says, there will be a time when I will be absent from this body, which is the corrupt, the mortal body that will not last. But at the time of the resurrection, guess what happens? I get a new body. I get an immortal body. That's when the gift of immortality is given, and that's when I will live together with him. And you know how much time there is for any of us between the time of death and the time of the resurrection?
Supposedly the blink of an eye.
The blink of an eye.
Yeah, we don't lay there and
If there is no conscious thought that's going on, the very next thought that I have is, boom, there's the resurrection.
All right. Clarify a couple things for me before we take a break and move on. What about, and we're close to Halloween as we record this.
Yes.
What about the whole concept of ghosts and demons and all of these things that society has adopted as, I think they've adopted it as truth, not folklore.
Yeah, that's true. What have been some of the most successful movies, scary movies?
Dead people.
That have happened.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a list here. Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, The Conjuring, Amityville Horror. What was similar about all of those scary movies?
Yeah, ghosts.
Well, not just ghosts.
Okay.
Demon possession.
Okay.
And they even talked about it specifically as demon possession. We talked about in our last presentation about demon possession and how both the Old Testament and the New Testament talked about it. And that's why warnings were given in the Old Testament. Don't have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
Don't have anything to do with people who are trying to conjure up the dead. Don't have anything to do with any witchcraft activities, because what you're doing when you're doing this is you're connecting yourself with demons.
So what about those people that think they've been visited by a loved one? I'm not talking about the demons, just somebody who came to them after dying and gave them a positive message, most usually. Hey, I'm okay. I'm doing great. Move on with your life. I love you. Goodbye.
Why did God say in the Old Testament, don't have anything to do with it? Because the devil and the demons that are part of his realm are very good at deception.
Okay.
Have nothing to do with it, because you're not conjuring up the dead. What is happening with the dead? They are resting in the grave.
And so grandma's not upstairs watching me. See, and when I learned that, what a relief, because my grandma would not have been very happy with a lot of my life.
You know, Mac, if you could get in contact with Grandma and she was up there in heaven someplace, or you could get in contact with Adam, or you could get in contact with Abraham, wouldn't that be a good thing to have some communication, and they could say, hey, you know, be a good follower of God because you'll get this reward someday? Wouldn't that be a good thing?
Yeah.
Why would God stop that?
You tell me.
God has no reason to stop that. The dead are in their graves.
Okay.
So who is it that we're communicating with? Evil spirits.
Okay.
Demons.
I never said anything to anybody at the time of grieving, but Grandma does not earn her angel's wings.
She doesn't.
You know, we don't become angels. Angels are below us in the chronological idea of life and death.
And yet, when we die and we have followed Jesus, when we have said, I want to follow Jesus and be his disciple, we can die with assurance of knowing that the next thing we know, we will be raised in the resurrection.
Yeah.
And we will be given the gift of immortal life.
All right, so that's the first part of this conversation, and this conversation is going to continue. And the name of the conversation today, or this program, is "What Does the Bible Say About the Realm of the Dead?" My co-host is Pastor Delmar Austin. I'm Mac McKoy. I want to thank you for listening. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with part 4 of this series here on The View from